Today we are bracing ourselves for the cold so we can go digging for some legendary Excavate treasures in our final day of reveals for the upcoming mini set, Delve into Deep Home. So let's get into the first card we have here is a Paladin Shaman legendary, Sir Finley the Intrepid, 3 mana, 2/3 Murloc with Battlecry. If you've excavated twice, transform all enemy minions into 1/1 Murlocs. Okay, this is pretty interesting. Having the kind of requirement of excavating in Paladin and Shaman, which is kind of new, but we are getting some more with the other cards that we'll be looking at next. But transforming specifically only enemy minions is pretty fantastic. And Finley is cheap. It's only 3 mana, so you can easily be able to do another Excavate card and then play this in the same turn if you'd excavated once previously. So this honestly seems pretty solid all around. It is a legendary, so you can only have 1 in the deck, so you have to make sure that you actually find your Excavate cards and draw this, but honestly, it's pretty solid. Then next we have the 2 Excavate legendaries. These are not craftable. These are just the legendary rewards that Shaman and Paladin get from excavating the 4th time. So these, again, you can't craft. They're not going to be in your collection. These are just the Excavate rewards. But these are the 2 new classes that are getting those Excavate legendaries. So again, 4th time you excavate, you'll get these. So for Shaman, it is the Azerite Murloc, a 4 mana 5/5 elemental Murloc with Battlecry. Transform all your other minions into ones that cost 3 more, keeping their original costs. Now, this is a little bit different from what we have seen before. This transforms all other minions. So this is actually including minions in your hand and your deck as well as on the board. So normally we see a transform effect that would be like transform your other minions, and those would be only the minions on board. But this one also transforms the cards in your hand, any minions in your hand, and any minions in your deck into ones that cost 3 more. And those in your hand and in your deck keep the original costs. This is like, wow, this is pretty powerful. It almost feels a little memey, but at the same time, this can still be very, very strong. The cool thing that I like about this is because it's that Excavate, you can also play a lot of your other cards. You can play those Excavate things. If there's maybe a minion that you have in your deck that you don't want to transform, I mean, there's a chance that you actually get to play that minion before you ever even excavate 4 times to get this, and then you don't have to like transform that minion that you want while it's still in your deck or something. So this seems pretty flexible. It's a battle cry, so you get the effect as soon as you play it. You do have to excavate 4 times to get this. You'll get it on the 4th excavate, but still pretty good. And honestly, the stats on it itself, 4 mana, you get the evolve effects, the transform effects, and jumping up to minions that cost 3 more and not just like 1 above is pretty significant as well. So this seems very powerful. And then the legendary Excavate treasure for Paladin is another elemental dragon. I'm so excited. I love elementals. I love dragons. So to see the dual type is perfect. And Paladin's one of my favorite classes. So we have the Azerite dragon. Again, a 4 mana 5/5. Battlecry, give all other minions in your hand, deck, and battlefield +3/+3. All right. I think this is still a powerful effect. It might not be quite as significant as transforming your minions, but the 3/3 with Paladin +3/+3 to Divine Shields, to rush minions, to potentially future Excavate cards if you're going to play those. Like, there are so many utilizations for this buff, and because it also impacts minions that are on the board, if you only have 1 minion in your hand, that's fine. That's one downside to a lot of the previous just like hand buff only things that we've seen in classes, is that it feels pretty bad sometimes to play the minion and just buff things in your hand, but this does your hand and everything else. So you can play it if you just need to buff things on your board for a lethal or for value trading. If you want to buff things in your hand and then play them, you can do that too. But you get so much more value from this than previous just hand buff only stuff. So this is pretty big. This is pretty significant. Again, though, these are Excavate treasures, so you do have to excavate 4 times to get these. So it is a little bit, I guess, restrictive in that sense that you do have to find your Excavate stuff and then get to this. But honestly, from the other Excavate things that we've seen in the other classes, it actually often feels pretty reasonable to be able to get to that point. I think for these 2 classes, it's going to feel a bit more probably like how Excavate feels in Warrior, where you often aren't going to be excavating like up to 8 times. You're only going to be doing it probably the 4, so you're probably only going to get these once, unless for some reason the game goes super, super long. But I think Rogue is kind of the outlier in terms of Excavate treasures. You're really probably not going to be like bouncing these back to your hand, playing them multiple times. I guess there could be potential for that, but it seems a lot less likely than classes like Rogue. So these do kind of feel a little bit more, to me at least, like the maybe Warrior Excavate stuff, where you're probably only going to get to do these once a game if you get to that point even. So I think on their own, they are pretty great, very impactful, like high impact cards, but you do have to get to that point. We'll see how that goes. We'll see if there is enough Excavate between these new couple of cards and the neutrals to make these more effective. Then our next set of cards here, I'm going to start with this one because we're still talking about Paladin and Shaman, so we'll start with this last Paladin Shaman dual class card, Shroomscavate. It's a 3 mana spell. Give a minion Wind Fury and Divine Shield. Excavate a treasure. Fantastic card. This is amazing. You're giving something Divine Shield and Wind Fury, which is incredibly powerful, and you're getting to excavate. It's only 3 mana. The downside is that you do have to have something on board, unless you have to use it for your opponent's minion, which would feel pretty bad. But you could, I guess, if you really had to. If you needed to excavate, you could cast it on your opponent's minion and then maybe kill it or hex it or do something else. But this is pretty great. As long as you do have something to give the Wind Fury Divine Shield to it. I mean, this does a lot of things that these classes like to do, and you're working towards that excavate. So great. I honestly even like this in more of an aggressive Shaman or Paladin that you're just looking for buffs. Even if you don't focus on excavates, you get the bonus of excavating 1 time. So maybe you find an additional 3 damage from the excavate with rock, or maybe you find a little bit of a heal and draw a card. But in those like really buff aggressive decks that these classes do often have, a Wind Fury Divine Shield, fantastic. And the excavate just feels like a bonus. Then I'm going to shoot over to our card all the way to the other side. Our Shaman card is Digging Straight Down. 4 mana nature spell. Deal 8 damage to a minion. Excavate a treasure. Okay, so 4 mana for 8 damage. Not bad. It does have to be directed at a minion, but this can kill off more powerful minions. And it's a nature spell, which does work with Shaman. There's some things that might reduce the cost of nature spells. You may be able to discover this as well. And being able to deal 8 damage to a minion means you're going to be able to kill more powerful stuff. So if you are looking to build some sort of excavate shaman, this probably fits in. Not sure if this does get fit into other shaman decks, kind of like this one. I think this one can fit in to, like I said, maybe aggressive decks or other decks that you aren't just going for excavate. Digging Straight Down maybe is one that you would think about if you want to put into a shaman deck if you're not going for the excavates. Now we're going to switch over to another dual card. This is going from Shaman and going into Warrior. So we have Shaman Warrior, Needlerock Totem. It's a 2 mana 0/2 totem. At the end of your turn, gain 2 armor and draw a card. I love this card. I think this is fantastic. Sure, you're not getting a minion that can attack, but you're guaranteeing that at least the one time on the turn that this comes out, at the end of that turn, you are getting 2 armor and drawing a card. That is fantastic. That's a fantastic effect, and I think even in decks that don't want to play this, maybe you don't just jam this into your warrior deck. You could potentially, but I think warrior already has a lot of tools that get armor and draw cards, so probably don't need to play this in warrior. Shaman definitely can utilize this. Card draw for Shaman is definitely fantastic. There's not necessarily a ton of it depending on what deck you're playing. And getting this off of something like Cactus Construct or generating a 2-cost minion, this is going to be wrecking havoc everywhere. I feel like that's a really good card. And our final 2 cards here, we have another Shaman Warrior dual class card, Aftershocks. This is 4 mana nature spell. Deal 1 damage to all minions 3 times. Costs 2 less if you cast a spell last turn. Okay, this might be one of the best cards for today. Honestly, this is really good. Dealing 1 damage to all minions. Okay, maybe you don't want to deal damage to your own stuff, but for warrior, there's already kind of some tools like that. But the big difference for this one, opposed to some other removal and some other damage things, is this deals that 1 damage once, then twice, then 3 times. And that is extremely significant against death rattles and divine shields. So things like Tree and Druid, where it's going to, maybe they have 2/2s that are going to summon more 2/2s, right? It's going to deal that damage, deal the damage, trigger the death rattles, then deal another damage. Very significant. Against things like Paladins, where there's a lot of divine shield, you're going to remove that divine shield first and then deal another 2 damage. And being able to play this for only 2 mana if you casted a spell last turn, that's huge. 2 mana to do that is great. Again, this is also a nature spell, as I just mentioned. It's a little bit more upside for nature spells in Shaman rather than Warrior, but Warrior does actually decently play a lot of spells. So I think if you want that additional removal in a warrior deck, this might be an option. This honestly could even go into something like Enrage Warrior, where you kind of want to be dealing damage to your own stuff too. So I actually think that this is a really, really good card. This might be one of the best cards of this last day of reveals. And the last card here, another Paladin card. This is Fossilized Kaleidosaur, and it is a 4 mana 3/4 undead beast. I am very intrigued that it's a beast and not a dragon, not like an undead dragon, because you would think that maybe it's a dragon. But I guess if it's more of a dinosaur, those are more beast. But to me, it looks like a dragon in the picture, so that's why I think dragon. But it has a battle cry, gain 2 random bonus effects, and excavate a treasure. So, all right, the bonus effects might be great. They might just kind of fall flat sometimes in some of those cases. But getting 2 of them, I think, is much more significant than just getting 1. It's more likely that you will get at least 1 effect that you would really like on this. A divine shield, maybe stealth. Okay, those would be pretty cool. But you're probably playing this in decks that you actually do want that excavate bonus. I'm not sure if you play this in a different Paladin deck. I don't think that this is the kind of thing you want to just like play in an aggro deck and say, okay, cool, I'm going to get like 2 random bonus effects. Sure, there's already better tools, at least right now. Maybe once rotation happens, if there's less cards, maybe you play this in a more minion heavy or mid-range type Paladin that you want bodies, and this could be great. But right now, this is not going to be played in like every Paladin deck. I really don't feel like this is probably going to actually just be played for those excavates, to continue your excavate so you can get to 4 and get that cool legendary elemental dragon. And that is all of the cards now for our Delve into Deep Home mini set. What do you think of these cards? Which cards are you most excited for? Are you going to be trying any new decks? Please let me know down below. I would love to hear it. And If you do recommend any decks, maybe I'll end up trying them out or putting out a video based on those decks. So love to hear those. Put those in the comments below. Thank you so much for checking this out. And if you haven't already checked out all of the previous reviews that I did for these, then check that out, or go ahead and check out some other Hearthstone content that I have done. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.